And the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think we can make our world better by fixing our workplaces, I got a treat for you today. Round of applause for the one and only Amy Bernard-Bond, one of my best friends in this industry. You guys are going to really enjoy it today. We're going to be talking about how to be assertive without aggression. How can we persuade? How can we drive more influence in our organization in a clean, effective way? So we're going to be talking about negotiation techniques for ethics and compliance and HR professionals. You will see a new console today. So thank you for all the feedback. We've made some great changes here. I hope they're great. We've made some changes to the console. So you can click this thing for socials and podcasts. Go ahead and click into that, and you can see our library. You can follow us on YouTube. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Follow us everywhere. Everywhere there is to be followed. So hit that QR code, or you can click that link. Keep those emojis coming. I got a good feeling about today. I have not eaten lunch yet. Amy, it's still early for you, so maybe we can have a little emoji snack to carry us through this hour. Click this QR code, guys. Check out us everywhere. And we are giving away Amy's book. Amy, let's do earmuffs for you right now. I got a couple things to say about this book. So I don't know how you can be in ethics and compliance or HR and not have bought this book yet. This book is something that it's full of worksheets and perspectives that I think really can shift your mentality about your job and your career advancement. I just can't say enough great about this book. It's super impactful. You can spend 5 minutes in it. You can spend 5 days in it, and you will leave with a new mentality and a new framework that's really going to help open your eyes to a lot of the opportunities that are out there. So hope you can win the book today with some of your comments and questions, because we're giving away 5 of them. But if you don't win, I would say go ahead and buy it, because this deserves a spot on your nightstand. Ecosystem is our integrated ethics and compliance management platform. It's our next gen tool that helps smart ethics and compliance and human resource folks find the risks in their organization, engage people with their ethics and compliance program, mitigate those risks, analyze those risks, so we can ultimately demonstrate effectiveness. Should the DOJ come knocking, or should the board ask if what we're doing and what that impact is. And so if you have anything coming up in the next couple of years and you just want to kind of see what's out there, I encourage you to reach out. I also want to read you a little quote that I got. This is a real quote here. Okay, these are not my words. We do these custom benchmark reports, and if you're an Ethicsverse member, I don't know why you haven't gotten one of these yet. These are phenomenal. We've done like one a day for the last quarter, so people are loving these. Let me read you this quote, and I won't sell this anymore. Thanks for providing a custom benchmark report. You rock. You rock. Imagine someone saying that. We reviewed it during our board meeting, and it went really, really well. It helped me get everyone on the same page and align our focus for the year, building a better speak up culture. It was super helpful in telling our story. I love it. So these are great. This is a great tool to get your leadership on, your general counsel on. We can go through it and help them see, using data, where you might be falling short, and help kind of put that bug in their ear, plant that seed to get the resources you need to elevate your program. So the name of the game is persuasion. Don't forget, everything is influence. We can't force people to do anything. We're going to be diving into that today. 1 year free is still in effect if you're an Ethicsverse member, so check that out. Great way to de-risk your transition. And I'm going to keep talking about the survey until I get 1,000 answers, okay? We want to get not 1,000. We want more answers. So please take a minute, if you haven't done so already, fill out this survey. We really take serious the hour you spend with us every single week. We want this to be highly valuable for you. We want you to look forward to this time where we all can get together in our spot to meet and to network and to sharpen our saw and to hit that reset button for the next week. So please tell us how we can make this better, because I love you. Here's me. Check out these dudes back. Look at me, huh? I'm Nick. I'm chief servant at Ethico. And I got to find these glasses. I mean, these are crazy. And this is Amy Bernard-Bond. She's a partner and founder and CEO. She is she's a partner at Kaplan and Walker. This is like the premier ethics and compliance law firm in the nation. And she's also a coach, Bernard-Bond Coaching and Consulting. She is amazing. So if you have not met her, follow her on LinkedIn, follow her everywhere there is to be followed. And here are a couple of QR codes if you want to reach out to Amy for consulting. Amy, give us a little rundown of kind of what you do here and how folks might be able to interact with you in either in a passive or in an active way.
Yeah, thank you. I would love, first of all, for everyone to connect with me on LinkedIn. I always connect with compliance and ethics people and attorneys and people working in the culture space. I've had a long career. I was a Fortune 5 compliance officer at McKesson. I built 3 compliance programs from scratch. I also have a deep understanding and career in HR. I've been a CHRO, a CICO, and a CAO in the C-suite. So I bring all of that knowledge together because for me, it's part of the same coin, which is sides of the same coin, which is creating an ethical culture where everyone wants to be and where we can do our best work. So the way I do that now is I've merged my career interests, and I have my coaching and consulting book. I'm a professional certified coach, member of the Harvard Institute of Coaching, rated the #1 career coach and in legal by Thinkers 360. And then I also am a partner with my fabulous colleague, Rebecca Walker, whom I hired when I was in-house. And she and I do compliance and ethics risk assessments, underprivileged, and are always happy to get on the phone with you. We've started our own webinar series on compliance mastery. We have one coming up on board oversight with SECE credits. I love being in both spaces. So I have a niche specialty in coaching compliance officers to be more effective, have more influence, get what they need with less stress, with less anxiety. I also write for Compliance Week and Harvard Business Review on a variety of topics, from pay equity to protecting yourself as a compliance officer was a recent one in terms of the latest DOJ pronouncements around holding compliance officers liable. And so also having been an employment lawyer, I put some advice in there on how you can protect yourself and really get ahead of the ball, because I'm a little concerned about the way that regulators are starting to go after compliance. I think they're frustrated. And so I think they're looking for someone to blame besides the CEO. And we need to be aware of that. So that's kind of my range of work. And then I'm always interested in helping everyone be a more effective leader.
Yeah, if so, Amy, you're kind of this unicorn. You're very smart in ethics and compliance, phenomenal attorney, legal mind, but you also have this penchant for like influence. And we've spent hours talking over the years about that game, that influence game, and how we have to be able to marry our sort of like head knowledge with our heart-based influence if we're ever going to get anything actually done in a sustainable way. So I'm super excited to get you on here. Definitely check out that webinar series from Kaplan and Walker. Just genius comes out of these guys. So follow them everywhere. Let me give you a little outline of what we're going to be talking about today. As always, we want to hear your questions, your comments, your tactics and techniques. Obviously, connect with each other. Your network is your network. Like we say, neither one of those are big enough. So let me tell you what we're going to talk about today. So we're talking about persuasion. We're talking about negotiation techniques. How can we be more assertive to get what we need without aggression? How can we be more effective? So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the types of negotiations: inbound, outbound, and career-based. And then we're going to touch on delivering bad news. And then we're going to talk about general kind of persuasion principles. We're going to talk about prep and reflection. We're going to talk about intel and strategy. And then we're going to talk about 3 sort of persuasion tactics: social proof, reciprocity, and likability or alignment. And then in the final section, we're going to talk about gender judo and how we can be a little bit more effective and a little bit more strategic in our negotiations. So keep those questions coming. Like I said, let's just dive in, Amy, and let's talk about these different types of negotiations. And let's start with kind of inbound. Talk to us a little bit about inbound negotiations.
Yeah, inbound is when you get a request to do something that perhaps you weren't expecting. It's normal for your boss to set up goals, guidelines, projects. You've got your daily job. If you've been there a while, you probably are familiar with that. But there can be these surprise things that can happen, especially in a matrixed organization. And especially I see this now with my clients with reduced resources. There's a lot of layoffs going on. My last article for HBR was about, 6 mistakes leaders make when doing layoffs. The first being that they don't look at other ways to cut costs besides doing layoffs, which is a whole other topic we could talk about, because some people just aren't strategic about that. And it's very short-term thinking. But you may be asked to do more because there's less people. That's happening a lot. It happened in COVID, it happened now. So what Nick and I have talked about, and we're totally in alignment, is you need to prepare yourself ahead of time to negotiate for that situation. And my philosophy is you're always negotiating. Every conversation you have, I think you're beginning negotiating with your employer the minute you get that offer letter. You're creating a brand for yourself on how people contract with you socially to do work, especially if it's outside your normal day-to-day job. And so we think it's better to prepare for that ahead of time so that you're not caught off guard. you, depending on the power situation of the person that's asking you, that's something you need to consider. Nick, I think we have a nice one pager for people.
Oh yeah, yeah, I forgot to mention that. Great takeaway here that we came up with. It's on the console, but go ahead.
Okay, cool. Around, think about the power dynamics of who's asking you and be ready. What I find, and we can talk about the gender differences in negotiation a little bit here as well, because they're kind of nuanced. And we have a great cue up, I think, from Noah on a really fun movie clip that is one of my favorite examples of someone who did not prepare well for being dumped on before the weekend. I'm sure that's happened to some of you. I know it happened to me in my law firm when I was a junior associate. Do you want? There we go.
Oh yeah, I'm playing it. Sorry.
Hello, Peter. What's happening? I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow. So if you could be here around 9, that would be great. Okay? Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm also gonna need you to go ahead and come in on Sunday, too, okay? We lost some people this week, and we need to sort of play catch-up. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, let's not be Peter, right?
Right.
When Nick and I were discussing, like, oh my God, we've got to include that clip from Office Space, because that is look, he doesn't even say a word. Okay, does Peter do anything? No. He tries to just run, not a helpful strategy, not good for your executive presence either, by the way, which is one of the key elements of promotability in my book. People will look to you. Are you the dumping ground? Peter clearly is the dumping ground here. Like, everyone else left early. They knew what's his name was going to go run around at the last minute. And there was always that partner at my law firm who did that. So don't be Peter. Nick and I are going to teach you how to do that. So number one, prepare for the situation ahead of time. Know that there are just some people who are going to make their emergency yours. They're going to try to do that. So be prepared for that. And your body has to kind of already be ready for that. Have some sentences in your head. Just say, oh, tell me more. Like, stay curious, stay friendly, because you want to build these relationships. You never know. One of my favorite sayings that I've come up with is, eventually someone's either going to work for you or they're going to be your boss if you stay at a company long enough. So you do want to preserve that capital. So, just ask, and then you start negotiating. Also, asking more questions gives you time to think. So There's a strategy there. Is oh, okay, is this a last minute request? Is it really due? Like, think of some things that buy you time that also get you some information. Is it due Monday? Is this a key client for you? That kind of thing. It matters if it's in your scope of responsibility or not. If it's not, I think you have more negotiating power to say no. You should be ready with what you already have on your desk and just say, let me share with you what I'd love to be helpful. And I've got a lot of other things that are due right now. And I would have concerns if I said yes to you right now, that's going to impact some of my other stuff. And just say, I have this, and this. If you know your boss might have your back, I would say, let me just check in with June and I'll get back to you. And then, at a minimum, even if you still get pushed to do the work, you have created some boundaries around, You're not just going to take it. You're not just going to sit there and passively take it. I was literally coaching my daughter over this weekend because she's taking her very first job after college. She's heard, even from the waiters in the town, she's like, well, that company's great, but I got to tell you, they work people to the bone. So she's already said to me, how am I going to set up my reputation? And we talked through, this is how you need to start setting up your brand. You don't want to be known as difficult to work with. You're young. You want to be known as quality. There's that project management triangle, right? Time, quality,
price,
and price. Exactly. You're not going to be dealing with price. You're going to be dealing with quality and time. So quality, you always want to be known for, especially as a young person, 100% out the box, great quality. Time is the one variable I think that you have to negotiate when you're in a consulting model, which is what she is. And so we talked about always being prepared. If you always know your run through, and my team, whenever I had teams, we did weekly reports. So I always knew what our project basis was. When I had people come to me, executives saying, we need you to do this, I'd literally pull out my spreadsheet. I'd say, great, I'd be happy to help. Where does this fit on the priority list? Here's what I've got. Here's the resources I have. So if I do this, I need to go, we need to go talk to Tom, because I've promised the CTO that we're going to do this compliance project, and they're finally ready and have staff. And you'd immediately see, like, I had data, right?
Yeah.
And I was a partner. I'm like, help me be a thought leader here, because this is my resources.
Yeah, I think having that in mind, a desire for sort of reasonable boundaries, critical, right? We don't want to be a dumping ground. We don't want to be perceived as weak or somebody that can just kind of, give me some more, roll some more of that down the hill, right? And I think if you don't have the time or the sort of cognitive, if it feels like too much of a cognitive load to like list out all these questions, the one thing I'd want you to take away from this section is how and what questions are your friend. If somebody comes with a problem that they're trying to dump on you, now they've made their problem your problem, okay? Well, by asking a how and what question, similar to what Amy just talked about, you now make that problem our collective problem. So how would you like me to reprioritize? That's kind of equivalent to her question of like, where do you want me to fit this in the priorities? What would you like me to move around, given I have all these things I'm doing right now? This is particularly good when your boss dumps something on you, to say, hey, I have all these other things. What should I reprioritize here? And now it's not it's not on you to hold the whole weight of the world on your shoulders. You're managing that. You're collaborating on that expectation, to Amy's point about kind of balancing between time and quality. And you can usually negotiate something that's a little bit more reasonable. Everything is negotiable, okay? Life is relationships. Relationships are negotiation. So everything's negotiable. Don't forget it. Go ahead, Amy.
You're also leveraging the power system if you're bringing in someone that has equal status. If you're unequal status with that person, like in the movie clip we showed, if you allude to someone else who has higher power, who you're already working for, you realize that the way you frame it, when I'm like, hey, let's talk to them together, or let me give them a call, they're realizing, oh, I'm going to be bumping. Am I okay? Because Amy's going to be going to them saying, hey, Steve approached me. I can do his work, but I'm going to have to demote your work. Steve then knows that Tom might be mad at him, right? Or might be like, well, I need to call him. My stuff's really important too. It helps. So, and the other thing that I would say is there's a fantastic article that's one of the most read ever in HBR. It's a little dated, but it's fantastic, called Who's Got the Monkey on Their Back? Yeah. Look it up. I have the link somewhere, and it's about the concept. It's like from the 70s, but the concept is absolutely clear. And I love the metaphor. The idea is sometimes you're walking around the hallway when we're in person, and someone will mention something to you. Be aware of when they've said something to you and you've allowed them to throw their monkey, their work, that's right, their issue onto your back, because you have a choice to carry that or not. And it's all in the negotiation of your language. Like if you've ever heard someone say, oh, blah, blah, and I'd love to meet with you. And then you might sometimes want to do it. Like you might say, okay, great. I'll set that up. I'll send you a calendar. Okay. So you've taken on some work, but it's bigger when it's like, hey, can you just do this? And then you realize, wait, how? And like 5 minutes later, you're like, I think I just accepted a bunch of work that I didn't. So be aware in the moment. It takes a little more mental energy, but it's so much better than on the back end being resentful, realizing you have to work all weekend, realizing your other work is suffering and you might get penalized for it. The other thing that happens sometimes with people early in their careers, they say yes to too many things because they are a people pleaser, or they think it's going to get them ahead, and then they get nailed for not doing their job. I don't know if there's anyone who's had that happen. I'd love to hear about it in the chat. But I know people who've literally had that happen, and they're shocked because they're like, oh my God, the company, I was doing everything the company said. It's like, yeah, but your boss is the one that promotes and raises your salary, not these other people. So you've got to be aware of enough of your vertical and whether you're truly going to get the credit for that extra work, because so many people actually don't get credit for the extra work. So be aware of that system as well.
If that's happening a lot, to your point, Amy, you have, whoever I'm talking about here, you have created a pattern. You have allowed a pattern to be created. And so
Bingo.
human beings are natural pattern recognition machines. And so it's on you to create an anti-pattern to counterbalance that and countervail this thing that's happening over and over again. You have to do things a little bit differently, and these are great techniques. So let's talk about outbound now, Amy. If we have outbound requests of peers or of subordinates, whatever, what do we need to think about in the context of those types of requests where we're prompting it,
Yeah, so outbound requests are different. That's where you are asking for resources, headcount, et cetera. And so when Nick and I were thinking about the different negotiations, they're slightly different because we really want to be helpful for all of you. So prepare is the number one thing. Usually you have a little bit more time when you are the one asking. And so I find that putting together a thoughtful strategy, and this is on our one sheet that we're going to be sharing with you, is, to really be thinking about what's the status of the business. I just had someone, and I facilitate an executive women's group a few times a week in a mastermind. And we were talking about how to negotiate when her team has just they've filed for bankruptcy and they're being bought by another company. Not a great time to negotiate for resources. She feels she's underpaid. She knows she's underpaid, actually. And so we decided to table that for a month and then come back when the new company who's buying her company starts setting things up, and then I'm going to help her negotiate for that. So you do need to be sensitive to timing, what's happening in the industry, trends that are happening in your business. There are better times to ask than others for that kind of thing, or for headcount. It's the same thing. Having data at your fingertips is really important. Benchmarking data. Kaplan and Walker, we've done a benchmarking study around the number of resources different people have in different areas, which can be helpful potentially as data for you to then go to your board, go to your audit committee, go to your CEO or legal counsel around what you need. Risks are obviously another area, comparing what you have to risk and the cost of that. There have been some really great cases lately on what can happen and the cost you can pay. It's kind of pay now or pay later, depending on how highly regulated your industry is in. So I think that preparation and bringing data is key. Nick, what would you add as well when you're going? Because you have people who probably approach you at your company too now.
Yeah, I think for outbound, I really, the thing I'm thinking most about is just trying to empathize with that person and see how I can put this in a way that they would want to do it. Okay, I know that sounds like a little bit stupid, but I think leading with a why, or having that why ready behind that what is like my biggest kind of hack for outbound. I just think people, when they understand the context or they understand how this fits into some bigger picture, it feels less like kind of just like a weird exogenous task. And it seems to have a little bit more gravity or a little bit more weight from that perspective. And then also I just think being flexible, like to the extent, and then kind of flexible and clear, like unless it's an absolutely, clarity, unless it's an absolute emergency, drop everything. Well, then there's usually it's usually kind of negotiable. And I think some flexibility makes it easier. Like, I don't want people to like shut their doors when they see me coming because Nick's about to ask for something unreasonable. Okay. So if you guys feel that way, Ethico folks, if you feel that way, that's not my intention. Okay. But my point is, like, if we have that kind of flexibility and everything's not a fire, well, then I'm not kind of crying Chicken Little all the time. And then the ones that really do need that attention aren't going to get lost in the sort of same noise,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about terms of employment, those types of requests or those types of negotiations. Yeah. These are kinds of things where, I need something to continue working here, that kind of a conversation.
Right. Those are really important to prepare for. I have a couple of newsletters on this. If anybody wants those in a video too, just shoot me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn and remind me, please. But in general, I'd say number one, have your data ready. So there are 4 great ways to collect data about your market value. One is to share data with people you trust, ask people. There's some salary surveys that have been done by Barker Gilmore, by SCCE on salary that are broad enough to give you some range. Taking a recruiter call every once in a while, even if you're not looking, can be helpful. I usually do if it's someone reputable, because I think of names for them and try to be helpful. And then I ask them what the going rate is for someone with my profile. So it's kind of because they're already on the phone, you're helpful, they don't mind, and they've been in the market currently. So that's one of the best ways to get the current salary. And I just keep that when I was in corporate, I literally just kept that in a notes document and dumped it in. Anytime I got a data point, just dumped it so that I was ready before I needed it.
Smart.
And so that's important, you need to know your ask, and then you need to know your default position. Like, what's the amount of money I think is fair? And what would be my plan B if I don't get what I want? And plan B can be really powerful. Plan B might be like, someone might say, we don't have the budget right now, or I think you need to, demonstrate a little more. Well, sometimes people are really vague around that. So prepare to be more specific. So, some people say, oh, I don't think you're ready yet. A question that drives me absolutely nuts. I talk about in my promotability seminars. So you get more specific. You say, oh, tell me more about what ready means. What does that look like? Is there a skill that I need to improve? Like one of the 5 key elements of promotability. Do I need to get better at presentations? Do I need to express more thought leadership? Am I demonstrating strategic thinking in an appropriate way? Because you might be a strategic thinker, but if you're an introvert or you're shy, you may not be asking the questions that demonstrate that you are a strategic thinker. Strategic thinking is so interesting because it's a skill that you actually have to demonstrate to get credit for it.
Correct.
And it's definitely a C-suite quality that people are looking for. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say the last thing I would add there is I think having that kind of discussion, and if I think the worst thing you can do is convey some like entitlement energy. I think the way conversations like this go well with me is when somebody comes with like a high agency approach to say,
absolutely,
hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I'd like to be. How can we get me there? Okay, great. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, now I have clarity, just like on the other side, I have clarity that like this person is not satisfied with where they're at. This is where they need to be. And now we can craft something together. We can collaborate on that path and make that, to your point, very clear, very dialed in, and kind of remove as much subjectivity from that as possible. I've been in situations in my, back in my prior life, so to speak, where I felt like I was hitting the ceiling, and I was like, man, what am I not doing? And it wasn't until I had that really candid, transparent conversation with that high agency kind of energy that I saw, oh, okay, I need to kind of dial this in. I need to make some changes here. And that really helped, again, plant the seed in my boss's mind that I'm gunning for that promotion. Now he's tuned in to trying to see these new change in behaviors. And I was able to pull that promotion forward probably by about 18 months. So this stuff is really powerful, but I think it's all about the energy we go to it. I'll tell you when these conversations go bad, for me, I'm like, when I'm on the other side of them, when they're like, well, I should be paid more. And I'm just like, okay, well.
Those are awful conversations. You need to equip yourself. You need to help your manager. Frankly, that's why I created the Promotability Index. If people it's free. It's my gift to the universe, leveling the playing field. It gives you 82 things to objectively talk about. It removes subjectivity from the promotion process. A lot of leaders promote who they like, and that leads to a lot of bias, right? So, and not the best business decisions. So my goal is to try to get companies to think more consciously about who they promote and why, because there's no more tangible expression of a company's values than who they promote and why. And they usually don't share the why. So you need to be able to tease it out of them. So taking this assessment actually not only helps you assess where might I need to improve, but it enables you to have a powerful conversation with your boss around what areas am I potentially missing? What would I need to get to the C-suite, or what would I need to demonstrate to get that raise?
And you dropped that link in the chat, right?
Yeah, I think I did. I'm happy to do it again.
Yeah.
Cool.
We got a great question from P. Ramsey. How would you manage dual reporting, where you report to both the CEO and you also report to legal/compliance in your parent company? They have conflicting priorities, for example, business versus legal, and feel their views/items to be the most important. So how do you navigate that? I mean, that's a tough one, Those are challenges. Yeah, I coached a client recently who had worked for a Swiss-German parent company, but their boss was the country manager in New York. So it was a hub-spoke, centralized compliance unit with the business in New York manager. And it was very, very challenging. One group thought they were doing fantastic, but the direct manager
didn't like compliance, was completely unsupportive. I don't know. I've been in that situation too. So I don't know how many of you are in that. For global multinationals, that can be really challenging, especially when you're not at the headquarters. I would say you need two different strategies, especially if their agendas are different. It's a dance. You have one set of goals for one stakeholder who has authority over some of your compensation and upward mobility, and you have another set of goals for your direct lead manager, and you kind of work them accordingly. It can get exhausting. In some cases, it can get toxic if they're playing one against the other. You can get triangulated in some of these roles in a global role. And so that may be time where you need to assess, why am I here? What are the skills I'm gaining? How's my mental and work-life health? And, do I want to set a timeline for learning what I need to learn, getting the job title, getting this experience, and then potentially transition you to another role?
That's great. I think that's right. I mean, you have to be the perfect courtier. That's what influence is all about. And it's not about being fake. It's not about being inauthentic. It's about authentically understanding how the person, your adversary, views the world, what's important to them, and drawing through lines to where you can kind of balance this complex dance, as you called it. I think that's spot on. But like so much of our job, I think the strategic thinking is a great corollary for like the ethics and compliance, in many cases, the human resource role, because we're doing, strategic thinking happens inside your head, but you only get sort of credit for it or like influence from it when it's like out in the world. And the same thing happens. There's a ton of great work being done in compliance teams, but like many folks don't share that like to the rest of the organization. So then they don't get credit for that stuff. And then the reputation they have or the influence level they have is kind of just ends up being what it is. Again, a lot of what we're talking about today is how can we exhibit more agency and grab that steering wheel of our career to make sure the effectiveness that we're putting forward in pursuit of our organization's mission is as high as possible. So let's jump into kind of the next phase here, where we're talking about, these are just kind of general principles on how to kind of apply what we're going to be talking about. How, these are sort of general principles to kind of get settled in our mind if we're about to embark on a persuasion skill level upgrade initiative for our own development. Okay. So one is about kind of preparation and reflection, and the other is about intel and strategy. So you touched on a little bit about preparation when we were talking about inbound and having kind of your ducks in a row, or having some data points ready, or having some talk tracks ready, so that when something gets dumped, you can collaborate and find, a path through it that's bearable, I guess. What are some other kind of prep and like reflection tactics or, techniques that we should be utilizing?
Yeah, I helped a CCO client who was pitching to also have ESG under their rubric, under their responsibilities recently, and to get a raise and a title change, which was pretty cool. And so we prepped a deck for the board, and the first draft that I saw was very what I'll call me oriented, unintentionally. It's hard for us to get out of our own heads, right? So it was about, and I said, we need to think about this from the CEO perspective. What do they have to gain? What is the business rationale? And we completely flipped it around. You need this, and this is going to be attractive to customers because you are going to have an ESG plan. This was a couple of years ago, so it was even before some of the SEC stuff and international regulations that people are arguing over right now around what's the data and what's the reporting going to look like, which is still kind of in this messy forming and storming phase. So completely reframed it. She walked in with, this is going to make us competitive, and these are the questions the board's potentially going to ask. And I'm not asking, this is a minimum amount of funding. I've done some benchmarking. This is the title that I would like to reflect the work. This is the salary increase that I would like. They wound up negotiating for it not to be that year, but for the following year. So that's your plan B. Your fallback is, okay, so you can't do it right now.
Right.
If I deliver this, and this in the next 6 months, will you commit to a review of my salary at that time?
Great.
You got to be, they may say, oh, I can't do that right now. Well, like in that moment, that's where you've got your power. It's like, they say in sales, when you say you're interested in something, like, you're in the Medina in Morocco, like I was last year, and, you're negotiating for something, when you're in that moment, you haven't walked away yet, that's the negotiating power, because they've got a fish on the hook. It's the
Right.
same thing. The same thing when you're, in a room with your boss and they're like, I can't give you a raise right now. Okay, so when can we talk about it next?
Yeah. How can we get me there? What do you need to see from me in order to feel comfortable having this discussion?
Yeah, because if you say, I'll do the work, okay, I'll do the work for no extra money is what floats in the air, right? And so I want to talk about it after I've been doing the work for 6 months. Like you're setting a boundary. Like, I'm not going to just keep doing this for free happily.
But again, the high agency thing, I mean, look, this is kind of why we do the year free. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I think I can do this job.
Right.
So I'll go ahead and do that work. And the bet I'm making is that, okay, if this is the terms for us to have that conversation, then I'm going to be stacking the deck in my favor, because I'm going to do such a great job with what you're asking me to do that it's going to be obvious. And that's the same basis for this. It's like, all right, well, here's a year free and we'll put our money where our mouth is. Again, shifting it from that conversation where it's a self-focus to the other person's focus, as you did with this individual you were coaching, that reframe makes that whole conversation sound so different to that adversary. They're like, oh, this is about me. This is about the company. Okay, this is not just, I deserve more, I should be paid more. This is, hey, if we can do this, then now we're going to be able to do something that's going to make our mission, achieve better, and blah, blah, blah.
And the other thing that was savvy is we negotiated for the title right away.
Smart.
Which costs nothing. Right. And is advantageous to them, because if they get questions, it was like privacy a few years ago.
Yeah.
Who's your privacy officer? Well, now it's like, well, who's your ESG officer? They can be like, oh, it's so-and-so. Right. So they get credit. And then also, if she never gets the raise, guess what? She's now marketing herself potentially in the job market with that title.
Totally. So again, you got to get what you can get, and you got to get something, and many times, I mean, I guess it's life. Like, life is a game of incrementalism. So if you can't get the raise and the resources and the budget, or the title, well, what of that can you get now? What can you pull forward, and what can you negotiate, put a stake in the ground to have that real conversation a little bit later. Let's talk a little bit about intel and strategy, because this is something that I think a lot of us I think this area is a massive opportunity. So this is these are the things you need to kind of know beforehand. And, some people are really adept at this. They can walk into a room and kind of feel the power dynamic, and they can see, irrespective of title, where these concentrations of power are. Some people see that like Neo sees the Matrix. You know what I'm saying? Other folks kind of struggle with this, as the Japanese call it, like reading the air. And so that's sometimes hard to do right on the surface. Like, if that's not instinctual for you, this is a skill to build, and you can notice these micro expressions and these little changes, but I think you have to start to try to tune into it. So if this doesn't come, if this isn't like kind of second nature for you, I think here are a couple of good questions that you can kind of ask in your own kind of introspection or your own reflection time, to say, like, what is the power dynamic here? Who has the leverage in this situation? What leverage do I have? That's sometimes hard to assess accurately, because we tend to have a negativity bias, and we tend to understate our own power. This is just like a human thing. So it's helpful if you have a coach or somebody else nearby that you can ask and say, hey, what leverage do what do you think the leverage dynamic is here? And what leverage do you think I have? That may open your eyes to a potential leverage point that you didn't even consider before. But when we're talking about, a little bit wider of a scope here, talk to me a little bit about, I mean, you kind of described it, but how can we assess like the likelihood of a request in the context of maybe where the business is at in its life cycle, or in its, current marketplace?
Yeah. And so this is around just salaried and role, Nick?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would say the longer you're there, the more you should know. It's very helpful to have done some research and get information from HR about the pay philosophy of the company. Every company has a pay philosophy. Some companies, for example, say, we're going to pay top dollar. We want the best and the brightest, right? Other companies say, we're going to be at we're going to go at the 50% market rate. Both of those things are really important for you to know, because you're going to know the range that's acceptable and what job data points might not be valid for you to use in a negotiation. So that's important. I'd say looking and knowing the salary budget. Sometimes companies are transparent about that. So it's usually 2.5 to 3.5%. Sometimes in a good year, it's 5%. Some companies have a partial variable, like a bonus that's based on business performance or business unit performance. Stock is a possibility, RSUs, that kind of thing, and then base salary. So those are usually your three negotiating points in terms of what puts together your package. Yep. So, thinking about all that is important. Sometimes companies only do pay raises during the pay cycle. And so you want to be prepared well before that to put in for that kind of a request. I literally had one colleague who didn't know the schedule and put it in off cycle and then was told, oh, sure, but you should have put that in 4 months ago. Now we have to wait a year, which is crazy bureaucratic, but some companies are just kind of really rigid like that. So it's always better to soft message it. And you said something earlier around, letting your manager know, hey, I've been doing X, Y, and Z since my last raise. I feel like it's more substantial. Like, I think you need to explain the corpus of work you've been doing, how it's shifted, or if it's the market, or if you just got a master's in something. Those are all triggers potentially to say, I'm now worth more, basically.
Right. And then, I think that's spot on for those sort of like salary negotiations. And I just want to kind of underscore that this exercise or this principle of intel and strategy, you have to run these traps regardless of what the ask is, right? Like if I need somebody in a different department to do something for me, or I want middle managers to, be the chorus for my new policy or for my speak up program or something, this intel strategy is super critical because it really comes down to pausing for a second and trying to understand what that adversary cares about. And so what leverage do I have? Maybe I don't need leverage. Maybe I have an actual relationship with this person in, ops whose cooperation I need. Taking a moment to understand what's on their plate, what's likely on their plate, what dynamic they might be going through or what challenges they might be facing is going to allow you to provide a more well-informed ask. And I think that's what we're trying to get to. We need to get to a collaboration. We have to get someone to voluntarily do what we want them to do. We have to volunteer, we have to get, a leader's, endorsement of our Speak Up program or something, putting it in terms, like Amy said, that are going to resonate with them. That's really what the key is here. And understanding the power dynamics of maybe their own career advancement. Maybe you can incorporate some of that. Maybe there's a tension between another department. Maybe there, like what's the political landscape that you can get a glimpse of that if you have a glimpse of, you can make a more resonant ask. So I want to dive in. Thank you for these questions. Let's answer this question, and then I'd like to jump into these three tactics. These tactics have come from Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, one of my top 3 books of all time. We're going to talk about social proof. We're going to talk about likability, and we're also going to talk about reciprocity. But before that, I'd like you to answer, or just kind of reflect on this question from Dawn. Hey, Dawn, thanks for this question. How do you address it when your boss wants you to tell her, what do you want to do? My feeling is that I can tell them all day long what I want to do, but this may not be where they see the role going. Why do you think a boss would ask that kind of a question? And what kind of a strategy would you give someone for that type of a discussion?
It's interesting because some bosses are actually just told they need to have those kind of conversations, which I'm grateful for in that it's a proactive, vision-based. One reason may be asking because they want to know whether you want more responsibility someday, whether you're ambitious, whether you see yourself at the company, whether you see yourself in a leadership role. And that's really important for companies who are creating a succession plan, who have what's called often a 9 box, where they have a talent development session. A lot of companies are getting ready to do that right now. They usually do it over the summer, where they rate people on high potential on a classic 9 box strategy, which is like ready, needs help, not ready, needs 5 to 7 more years in the role. And then the idea is that the top leaders in the company strategize together to get those people opportunities over the coming year. So it can be a super positive discussion. It's often pretty private. Sometimes you're told, and or tapped on the shoulder, and that can be helpful. So that may be one reason why. One reason may be just they're curious and they want you to be prepared with a development plan. I would keep it a dialogue, would be my number one thing, is to ask questions. Thank you so much for asking. I really appreciate that. That shows investment in me. Tell me more about, here's what I see I do well. I think these are my strengths. Here are some areas I'm working on that I want to get better at. If you know some roles in the company that already are attractive to you, to 5, 10 years down the line, you could mention that. And then I would take that opportunity to turn the question back to them and say, where do you see me?
Right.
What areas or opportunities, either for leading a meeting, getting more visibility, getting more involved in my association, which can be a wonderful free way to get professional speaking experience. Every association needs article writers, speaking engagement people, organizing, membership stuff. Associations are a great low risk way to build your network and to gain business skills that benefit back at your other company. So I would keep it a dialogue and try to get under that question to find out why, but that's how I would handle that.
Amazing. How do you like that, Don? Pretty good advice, huh? Let's see some emojis if you like that. Okay, social proof. Okay, this is our first one. So Robert Cialdini's book has 10 different elements of persuasion. If you have not read this book, it's absolutely required reading. Don't come back to Ethicsverse unless you've read it. Just kidding. So social proof, this is the fact that people look to others for guidance and how to behave, especially in ambiguous or uncertain situations. And social proof can be expressed. It's just a persuasion mechanism. It's just a way to supercharge your persuasion and be more influential. So what are some examples of social proof? So I'm going to talk about these across a couple of different areas, and then we'll talk about how we can apply this in negotiations down to other employees, across to other leaders in our organization, right? Our other counterparts, our peers, and then finally up, whether that's to your boss or to leadership or the board or whatever. So some great examples of social proof is simply having somebody introduce you prior to a speech or something, or a presentation. When somebody else is speaking on behalf of you, that is an example of social proof. A great way to incorporate social proof to be more persuasive across the organization. Again, what's our job? We need to crowdsource that risk intelligence at scale and provide those insights back at the point of risk. We need that participation. The thing that prevents people from participating is this fear of retaliation, broad brushstrokes, of course, fear of retaliation. So how can I persuade somebody? How can I make them believe to engage in this program? Well, I want to show some social proof of other folks who have engaged in this program. So that could be a TikTok style video of somebody who was identified, spoke up through an investigation and had some change generate from that. Blinded stories on your ethics portal or in your posts on Slack or in your emails. Telling stories of people holding up whistleblowers is a great way to engage people. Again, they're looking socially, they're looking outward for guidance in ambiguous situations. If they have some speak up heroes inside your organization or people that have been promoted who have exhibited these qualities, those are all elements of social proof that we can incorporate to drive more of that behavior. Talk to us a little bit about, Amy, in terms of like talking up to the board or leadership, how we can incorporate some, external social proof, whether that's DOJ, other companies that have gotten in trouble. How can that be done effectively?
Yeah, I used to do a top 10 in my compliance and ethics meeting, which had the CEO and all the C-suite leaders. And that was super fun to say, hey, here are some companies who have hit, the top 10 in terms of risks, that kind of thing. That's super helpful to leverage. CEOs who have gone to jail, there are a few of those now. So those catch people's attention if they haven't already read about them. I think that other ways to increase your brand and, influence, Nick, are, again, if you get involved in your association, you are going to be getting intel from other companies. You can bring that back. You can say, oh, well, I'm involved. I have colleagues that are involved in our industry. This is some of the things they're doing. That gives you some social proof. You can, I like the parenthetical phrase as, when I wrote this article about X, or when I spoke at this conference.
There you go.
It's a way to, some people get worried about, understandably, no one likes a jerk who's self-promoting. So right. a way to put yourself out there and give yourself the credit you deserve for the work you do, is to use the parenthetical phrase. And again, it's around, oh, well, I was just speaking with the CEO of Mattel, or X company that's in your industry that's prominent, that someone will be like, oh, cool, they're connected, right? It's a way of saying I'm connected to smart people without saying that obnoxiously.
Right.
Or, I got this article published in CCEP magazine, which is, my industry magazine. Those are nice ways to do it. And it gives you the social proof that's super helpful for people to listen to, I think.
There's so much out there. Again, there's so much fodder for our influence that we can pull into these conversations to drive more impact. It's just really about getting a little bit creative. You can always tie it in. You just can. Because the things that, again, if you pull a story up from radical compliance or, any kind of DOJ pronouncement of a company that's in trouble, I guarantee there's some overlap with something that you're working on where you can incorporate this as a cautionary tale, either to drive different behavior or to, turn those light bulbs on in terms of the protections that you're providing to your organization. Let's talk a little bit about reciprocity. So whenever somebody moves into my neighborhood, you know what I'm doing? I'm walking over there with a nice casserole. Okay, so this is that people feel
sweet.
Obligated.
I wish I lived in your neighborhood.
My tuna casserole, it's almost worth moving in my neighborhood for. Okay,
All
it's
right,
almost
Nick.
that close. Okay.
All right.
I feel obligated to give. People feel obligated to give back when they receive something first, whether it's a gift, a favor, or a kind gesture. And I think a lot of us, let's just talk about, let's not say a lot of us, what some people kind of fall into is kind of this giving to get mentality, which ends up leading to a kind of a balance sheet mentality where we need this sort of one-to-one relationship between, hey, I provided some value to you and now I'm expecting some value back. Talk to us about, reciprocity from maybe a more self-actualized or from a vantage point of a higher plane.
Reciprocity is an amazing principle that has been researched and documented well in Robert Cialdini's book and in many others since then. And it's the idea that we gain credibility, friendship by doing favors for others. Another slight twist on this that I'll share that surprises people sometimes, and I've used it in my coaching when someone has a difficult working relationship, it's also equally very powerful to ask someone for a favor that you aren't getting along with or that you think doesn't like you. And that's because asking someone for a favor is actually an act of humility. It's actually being vulnerable. They can say no. And it is complimenting them, unless it's like saying, please walk my dog. It's, it's usually something different at work. It shows that you think they can be helpful to you. And that can really break the ice on something that hasn't gone well, or if you've had a stumble in a relationship. So that said, reciprocity, I think reciprocity is something that also requires what I think you and I, Nick, talk about a lot, which is an abundance mindset, which is if you get what you project into the world. And I'm not trying to be woo-woo here or horoscopes or whatever, but I genuinely believe that if you are a generally giving person, and I don't mean being a doormat, but I mean, you are giving in your nature, and that other people give back to you. The universe gives back to you. It's just rewarded. It may not be a one-to-one relationship. In other words, Nick, if I do a favor for you, let's say I make an introduction to a potential client, I'm not going to expect you to immediately, make an introduction to a client to me. But someone else somewhere in the universe, because I don't know, I'm just giving off friendly, nice vibes, and I genuinely want to help people. That's part of who I am. So someone else somewhere is going to do that for me too. It just comes back to you. Don't you all know people who are lucky? They're not lucky. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Open. That's right.
They're open. And so they prepared. They already have a mindset of, I'm going to be helpful. And I'm not going to let people take advantage of me. Fine. Shame on me once, shame on me twice. You know your people over time. You set your boundaries. Take care of yourself first. So, don't be cynical. It's not helpful. People who are closed off and something bad always happens to them, right? Or they just think, that's not going to help you. So this reciprocity is like, I have a rule that one of my coaches gave to me, that you help people and get to know people, and you don't ask them for a favor for a year. And
Wow.
in this social media, craze where we're, getting sold all the time and all this stuff, I want people, it's a way to show people you genuinely want to get to know them as a person. And we all know how important relationships are, and the mental health challenges that people have had since COVID, particularly anyway, but particularly. And social media doesn't help, right? And so I feel like reciprocity is just a beautiful mindset to adopt for the rest of your life. It's always going to come back and benefit you. And Robert Cialdini was saying that, look, if I do something for you, there are times when I've been like, oh, I really wish I could get help with that. And I've realized, oh, I did help that person out 2 years ago. Like, I gave a free coaching to their child who was getting their first job, and they just were nervous about interviewing. It's not what I normally do in my coaching, because I'm coaching C-suite, but I can do it. So I did it. It felt great. And I love mentoring young people, right? They're our future. So 2 years later, I actually got contacted for them for a paid keynote presentation. I'd forgotten that I'd helped them. I totally forgot. It wasn't like I'm not keeping track.
Yeah. So, well, you can't keep track. And if you're keeping track, then it's categorically not that abundance mindset. And I'm telling you, it doesn't just come back. It comes back tenfold. Like, I feel like I get 10x back what I give out. I just feel like
you
it.
Do.
Like,
and you're such a giving person. Yeah.
Well, it's that universal law of reaping and sowing, and but there's a multiplier in there, to your point. So when we're thinking about reciprocity, it's really about leading with value, and it's about adding value. And so if we need everyone's voluntary participation to do our jobs, whether that's managers, whether that's, CEOs, whether that's, frontline employees, if we need that participation, then we need to be, or we need their sort of voluntary participation. We need to be looking for ways that we can add value to those folks. Just how can we put our thumb on the scale, so to speak, to increase the odds of that participation, down the road when we need it. And again, it comes back to what Amy was saying. It comes down to truly understanding how can I help? How can I take some load off? Do I have some resources or some access to data that might be able to make you or help you do your job a little bit easier? Again, a lot of this stuff is kind of boiling down to authenticity. If you're trying to build an authentic relationship with your counterparts in other departments, well, then you're going to approach that a lot different than you would if you're just, kind of checking a box and just kind of, walking around with a hammer, as they say. So when we're talking to, employees, getting to know them directly, creating opportunities for growth, or even just going to bat for them, even just them understanding that you have their back is so much value, because so much of our success in our roles, at least from, our perception of whether success is possible, is rooted down in like trust. And that is of extreme value for, a subordinate or somebody on your team. So building that trust, that drives a lot of reciprocity. To peers, again, being generous with your time. Like Amy was saying, how can I help? Letting that abundance mindset that's inside of you really out, and letting that really kind of drive the car of your life, is going to create a lot of opportunities for you to share your expertise or to be helpful to other folks, to, again, build that authentic relationship. And then ultimately up to leadership. I mean, this is no different than what Amy was saying when she reframed that entire ESG proposal, but it's about focusing on what is going to add value for them. And like, hey, by acknowledging their objectives and framing what you're saying in a way that is going to help them do what they want to do, is so much more resonant than, again, that self-focus that is almost devoid of trust. So I want to jump down to liking, because we're getting close to the end here. And I should have, we should have booked this for like a 2-hour webinar, because once we get going, you can't shut us up. But let's talk about liking. This is perhaps the most, they're all important, but I just think this one is so critical. People like to do business with people they like. Talk to us about likability, and where, we can also call this alignment. Where does this, where do you see folks kind of fall flat here? And what are some good tactics to, enhance this or make this more of an asset for us?
Yeah. People will be I'll start with one general premise that's been psychologically proven by neuroscience research, is that people will be open to be influenced by us when they believe two things. The first is when they believe that we like them or respect them. And the second is when they believe that they can influence us. And
Right.
so if you take that premise, then, and I'm talking about liking in a work relationship sense. I'm not saying you're BFF, because we are talking about work and professional, the professional terrarium here. But I think that getting to know people's values and what's important to them is so important. There's been some talk in the chat. I got to see a little bit of it's hard to do and speak at the same time, but I try. And someone said, the golden rule. And one pivot I would do on that is treat people the way they want to be treated. And so that is that gets you better alignment, that gets you better likability. So if you can suss out what people's values are, and if you have high IQ or you pay attention, you can pick up on whether someone's fast-paced in their work preferences, whether showing diligence is important, or whether they're an ideator, they're a visionary, and they actually don't like the details. Knowing that kind of thing is helpful. I try to figure that out as part of my listening tour when I'm new in a company, to kind of bucket people so that I can situationally shift my style with them. Some CEOs are just quick and to the point and don't want any small talk. Other people, the relationship and warmth is very important. And we could talk a whole session about women and how women have to do some gender judo, I call it, in terms of the likability penalty that you can get from being perceived as overly assertive and not balancing assertiveness and likability, where men can kind of lean into assertiveness more without that penalty. Women often have to be a little more leaning into the approachability, unfortunately, because there is a bit of a double standard that we still have, happening. But I would say getting to know the person a bit, getting to know their likes and dislikes. One of the first questions I always ask, if this is helpful, just as a practical matter, when I'm meeting with a new boss or a new stakeholder, or even a peer, is, what's your pet peeve? And they usually laugh.
People will unload about a pet peeve, man.
It's awesome.
Totally.
And the cool thing about doing a listening interview in a new relationship that's important to you, that's a stakeholder, and it could be a direct report, that's important too. You want them to, for you and a person of power to a direct report, that really shows respect for them, and that's great. And I love
100%.
doing that. So I asked up, down, and across this question. It's funny because they laugh usually first, and then they're like, okay, well, now that you mention it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, cool. Now I'm armed with not doing X, which could be being late to meetings. It could be not keeping me updated on something. It could be something silly too, typos. But I had one CEO he was over the moon bad about a general counsel who has dyslexia, by the way, who sent a mistyping in her thing. So I coached her on how to have a conversation about her dyslexia, so that he could, number one, avoid liability for the company. Hello, I helped lobby through the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this is kind of an issue for me. Yeah. And and also be a better leader, and she wouldn't get penalized for it. But good to know. So all those things kind of play into likability.
Yeah, and I would say I think you're right. I think people like people who are like them, people who like them, and then that influence piece is another component for sure. I just think the key to likability is authentic, genuine interest in the other person. I like people that are interested in me, and I don't think I'm unique in that. You know what I'm saying? I think we all do. And I think and I hate talking to somebody that's just always trying to talk about themselves. We need to be talking about me, is my point. I'm just kidding. But that's actually how everybody feels. You know what I'm saying? So actually being interested in somebody on your team or your counterparts, and really trying to understand them, not just to check the box and say, okay, who's next on my listening tour, but trying to understand them as an individual. It gives you a lot more data. It's going to help inform you from that strategy and that intel perspective on how you can slate things in the right way. It's just a big data download. Are they a fast-paced person? Do they like to talk about their garden? Do they ramble on like Nick does? You know what I'm saying? You're going to get some data from that, and you're going to be able to dial that in going forward, while also laying that foundation of alignment and likability. It's just, it's so critical, and it's so important, And
for those of us who talk a lot, and I myself included, I have this self, thing. I just got a top LinkedIn voice for executive coaching, which I'm excited about. And
Wow.
one of my most popular.
Who do I have to pay to get one of those?
You can't pay, Nick. You got to earn it.
I'm kidding. I know. I'm kidding.
I know you are. But
those are earned. Those are earned.
And one of my most popular posts was, a lot of us talk too much. And this plays into likability as well as just EQ. So I now, because I'm an expressive, I've got a lot of energy, so I can really talk too much. So it's something I work on. And it's partly why I do some facilitation now, because it's great to give me the mental model of facilitating rather than always presenting as a keynote and whatever. And why am I talking? WAIT is a great acronym that I've literally I've done it today when we were talking. I'm like, Nick's making a good point. Oh, I have a point. And I'm like, no, wait, his point's really good. Yours isn't any better necessarily. So, it's so important to not add too much value as a boss. One of my mentors, Marshall Goldsmith, is amazing about that. I love watching him because he's always got something great to add. He's so much older and wiser than all of us. And he's coached CEOs, from Boeing to the World Bank. So, but he holds back too. So building that relationship often is also just keeping your mouth shut and your ears open. 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in proportion. You probably heard that. So those are some things as well that just likability, you learn more. And we're so excited. If you've got a personality probably like Nick and me, you're like, I'm like a puppy dog. Like I want to get in there. I want to but then I'm like, Amy, you're not. So I halfway through our conversation, I'm like, how much did you talk? And it's self-monitoring. It's totally. Self-monitoring. If you're an introvert, you may not have this problem and you may need to be more, extroverted. But introverts are some of the best listeners. This is like a super skill for them. And there's been an amazing book about the power of introverts as CEOs called Quiet. If you haven't read it and you're an introvert, highly recommend reading it.
Yeah. And I think, I get so hype about this industry because I just think the next 10 years are going to look so different than the last 10 years. We have such a foundation in place where we're going to be able to make small tweaks and really start to transform our workplaces in some meaningful ways that everybody is going to feel, but it's going to take those small tweaks and it's going to take that initiation of us who are kind of steering the ship or whatever, or steering the car of our department to kind of engage in some different ways. And I just get so excited about it because influence, persuasion is really the name of the game of this next chapter. And it is so powerful. It is you can multiply your impact with a little bit of persuasion. And for those of us who haven't lived a life of persuasion, nerding out on Cialdini books and, Kahneman books and stuff like that, I just want to underscore this. I can't say this enough. Some of the most influential, persuasive people are introverts. So if you have that thing, everybody thinks an extrovert is so persuasive. Really, they're kind of not. They have to really do a lot of back end work in order to actually be actually persuasive, because that takes empathy and that takes understanding and it takes listening, to Amy's point. And so if you're an introvert, you're really kind of starting from you have a massive head start in terms of true influence and persuasion potential. And so just spend a little bit of time thinking about this stuff. Spend a little bit of time reflecting before you have that conversation of how can I put this in terms that are going to resonate with this person? How can I tie my agenda to their agenda, or maybe tie it to the organization's agenda? How can I be flexible and empathetic to really build an authentic relationship with these people that I have to engage in order to do my job most effectively? I just can't stop talking about the opportunity in this realm. And I just really encourage you guys to just hop on YouTube, watch some of these Cialdini videos, get this book about influence. And you're just going to start to see, as you start to focus on it, you're going to start to see all these opportunities to put these tactics into work. So I know we ran over. We could have gone another hour easily, Amy. We didn't even get to gender judo. So I
know we didn't. We were doing
at this point. We might as well if you want to. I'm fine too.
Yeah, sure. Anyone who can stay on. I've got. Actually, you know what? I don't. I'm sorry. I have a client. Okay. That's why my alarm went off.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I just
realized I'd like to stay.
We're kind of fixing the world for about 200 or 300 people just now.
Okay. Right. Well, it was wonderful.
Thank you so much
for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you for your insights here. You guys follow Amy on LinkedIn. Check out those QR codes. We'll obviously send this around, and definitely download that resource on the console. And we will see you next week. See ya.
All right. Bye. Thanks.